Welcome back to another episode of Monday Re Tsene with Well Life Inc. Today's topic is unpacking the anxious child. It becomes important for us to realize that even as adults, we experience anxiety. Our children also experience anxiety. It is not uncommon for children to experience anxiety. And so as custodians of their mental health, their well-being, whether you are a teacher or a parent, it becomes important to realize the signs of anxiety in children. Now, what are the signs of anxiety in children? So the first one is that there is tremendous amount of fear or anxiety in relation to a specific event, a specific thing. The second is that we struggle to be able to calm down, or we struggle to use our words as children to communicate that. And so parents need to be able to reassure their children. Often, even if parents reassure children who are anxious, their anxiety does not reduce. And so it becomes important then to think about coping mechanisms. Another thing that children do when they think of anxiety is catastrophize. So what that means is that they would always focus on what could go wrong, the worst case scenario. And it becomes important for parents, for teachers, for caregivers to be able to ground our children in the necessary experiences. The next sign of anxiety is physical symptoms. The physical symptoms of anxiety is stomach aches, the ability for children to feel as though they don't want to go to school, so they'll say they're sick, or they'll feel fatigue, they'll feel irritation, they'll have rashes. All of that becomes really important to be noticing, and that becomes the signs of anxiety. So as caregivers, how do we equip ourselves with the tools and the abilities to deal with their anxiety? So the first trick with anxiety is that we do not want to eliminate the thing or the trigger that is causing the anxiety. What that means is, because our children are afraid of something does not always necessarily mean that they do not need to be exposed to it, because they do not then develop the coping skills and the mechanisms to deal with a discomfort or an uncomfortable emotion such as anxiety. So trick number one, do not eliminate, rather equip them with the tools to be able to manage the anxiety. The second tip is to give them very realistic expectations of what to expect. So the first thing, for example, we cannot promise that, we cannot promise that they won't fail a test, or that they won't be nervous for a Zulu oral, or that they'll have fun at a party. But what we can promise, what we can inspire, is their ability to be confident in their execution. So they will come through it at the end of it. So for example, they may not pass the test, but they would have completed the test. They may not have got an A, but they got a B. They have been able to manage the stress really, really well. So in order to empower them, they need to be reassured of their ability to cope with the anxiety. The third thing would be to limit the amount of time we discuss something that is a trigger for our children. If they are afraid of going to the doctor, for example, let's say they're getting an injection. What's important to note is that we cannot engage our children in a conversation 2 hours before they go to the doctor. They will be highly anxious before that. What's important is to shorten that period so that they are able to then cope better, right? You can promise that you will be there to hold their hand, for example. You can promise that daddy will buy them a chocolate afterwards. But we have to keep that period in which we discuss things with them really, really limited. We have to discuss it. So we can't ignore the fact that they're going to the doctor, because then they're going to be surprised and the emotional distress is going to be heightened. So it's important to strike the balance between when do I bring something up, how do I prepare my child, but not with too much time, because they will be anxious for the remainder of the time. Now, the second last thing is to not ask leading questions. So often when we label children's emotions, we will say things like, are you anxious about the test that's coming up? When that happens, we are pre-labeling how they are feeling. We need to be asking open-ended questions. We need to be asking questions such as, how are you feeling about your test? As opposed to labeling or leading that conversation. What it does is it allows for children to self-advocate for their emotions, to describe and to recognize. And the last thing is to be able to think about it with our children. Talking helps. Talking helps us determine if there are strategies we can put in place. For example, if your child is anxious about you forgetting to pick them up or for you being late, you guys as a unit can discuss what should you do. Should you talk to your coach, go to the nearest teacher, speak to an adult? All of those are really empowering elements that will help them experience their anxiety, but also then focus on solution generation and problem solving skills, which is really, really important. So the 5 are: don't eliminate, rather help them manage. Then you want to ensure that you are giving them realistic expectations of what may happen. We want to shorten the length of time, right? And we want to be able to ensure that we can talk to our kids about what they are feeling. If parents or caregivers are unable to be present with kids, we may miss the signs of anxiety. We may miss their feelings, their emotions, and that leads to bigger problems. What I want to urge you is that you are not alone. You could contact a registered counselor, mental health practitioner, talk to teachers to help your child better manage anxiety. The reality is that there is power in seeking help. There is power in ensuring that the emotions do not overwhelm the child and that they are able to adequately self-advocate, emotionally regulate, and be able to share vulnerably with you as parents, as caregivers, and as custodians for their mental health. Stay tuned for another episode of Monday Re Tsene with Well Life Inc.